Fast forward to June 2020, and an appearance on another public platform, Hachalu's interview with Oromia Media Network, OMN.
It was one of the most anticipated interviews. He left nobody untouched. He was vocally critical of the government. He was vocally critical of the Prime Minister's priorities. He was vocally critical of the Oromo political elites. He was vocally critical of the civil war, which involves the Oromo Liberation Army and the government.
The other controversy in regards to his interview was the one where he mentioned about past emperors, and specifically Emperor Minilik, where he said that he's not a great leader. It's a common narrative amongst Oromo scholars who claim that the Oromo people were subjugated to much grief and lots of abuses during the Minilik era.
So he touched upon almost every aspect of things that you could critically look. But there was nothing controversial about that interview if Hachalu was not assassinated.
Just one day after Hachalu's interview went out, calls for his death spread on social media. A week later, he was gunned down in Addis Ababa. In the unrest that followed, hundreds were killed and more than 9,000 people, including journalists, politicians and activists, were arrested. Security measures Ethiopians might have mistaken for things of the past. When Abiy Ahmed took office in 2018, the headlines coming out of the country signaled a significant departure. Repressive laws overturned, journalists and activists released from jail, political reunification in the region, landing Abiy a Nobel Peace Prize. Those days are gone, and the reaction to Hachalu's death and the hunt to find his killer are directly tied to the volatile political situation in the country, a constant tension between its largest ethnic groups, Oromos, Amharas, and Tigrayans. After Hachalu's murder, politicians, activists, and the network itself all went back to that interview on OMN to look for clues as to who may have killed him.
Following his assassination, government officials accused OMN being behind the assassination of the artist. They said actually OMN omitted certain section of that interview to hide that Hachalu was receiving threats. It's kind of government orchestrated kind of media propaganda.
There is always two sides to a story. There is the government's narrative and there is OMN's narrative. Everybody's saying that I was right, the other party was wrong. It is up to an independent investigation to determine whether the OMN people are right or whether the government is right.
Before an independent investigation could make that call, OMN was shut down. The main reason, according to the authorities, OMN's live broadcast of Hachalu's funeral. They also confiscated the Hachalu interview, sticking to their line that OMN had deliberately omitted a section which may have further incriminated the two suspects the government already had in custody. The administration also chose to air its own versions of the interview, in which it was a more selective editor than OMN was. They aired it on 2 channels, and both versions included the angle the government wanted to get across. Then the authorities arrested the interviewer, Guyo wariyo.
My last work for OMN is 2 days before Hachalu's killing. I never returned back to Oromia Media Network station. I never worked for OMN after the death of this man. I was mourning the death of my friend. Still, they arrested me saying I'm inciting violence. Where and how? I don't have information about Oromia Media Network because I'm not the right person to talk about these issues.
So who is the right person? We're trying to find anybody who will give us an answer. We started with the Prime Minister's press secretary, She passed us on to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General ignored us. His deputy hung up the phone. And when we finally managed to reach the spokesperson for the department, he said it was actually a matter for the Ethiopian Broadcasting Authority. The head of that organisation promised us a response via email. We're still waiting.